Welcome to our webinar about moving towards a new normal in the one-room schoolhouse. I'm Elizabeth. I teach at the Dakota GED and ABE program in Minneapolis. We're part of American Indian OIC. I'm really happy to be here with Patsy and a really fantastic panel today. I'll let them just turn on their cameras and wave at you. Jen, Abby, and Traci, and they'll introduce themselves and tell you about their programs much better than I will. So, this webinar is a result of the Statewide Professional Development Committee's One Room Schoolhouse subgroup, so thank you to them. Rather than having a formal agenda and objectives for today, it's going to be more conversational, like one of those coffee breaks we've all been missing with our colleagues at PD events. I just had some guiding questions for the panelists, and they're going to just tell us what's been going on in their unique contexts. How have they been making it work for their learners themselves? What do they predict or hope might be on the horizon for one-room schoolhouses in the next few months, and then thinking a little further ahead into the future? We've had so many changes, I don't need to tell you that. I think it's just really helpful to hear from others about how they've been navigating all the craziness of the past year, over a year now. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll have time for more discussion at the very end. So perhaps jot down your questions or put them in the chat as our panelists are talking, but know that we'll come back to them at the end after all three panelists have presented. Thanks so much, and I'll hand it over to Jen now.
Hi, I'm Jen. I work out of the Detroit Lakes office. We recently changed our name. If it looks different, we're Lakes Area Adult Education now. I've been with the program since 2018. And if you want to jump ahead, I'll tell you what our site looks like on the next slide. We have 10 school districts with 5 counties. So we just drew a map so you could kind of see where we are. If you're not familiar with our area, it kind of grew last year. We took on more sites. We have 1 full-time person, and we have 4 part-time, and then we have another person that's on in the summer. And this year we saw a huge drop, obviously, in students with COVID. So we saw about 130 to date prior, and then you can see our prior year comparison. We saw 231 students. Again, that was down too because we shut down in March, but so that's our programming. If you want to jump to the next one. So right now, all of our sites have different hours, just depending on where you are. Our main site at our M-State location in Detroit Lakes, we are open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 3, but the rest of the sites are all much more sporadic. We still have open lab going Mondays and Tuesdays, and then Monday, Wednesday evenings. We'll also jump on if a student calls, and if we're not busy, we'll jump on and work with a student by appointment on Zoom as well. And then we also have gotten some of our volunteers working over Zoom, but we found that it's best if we have them schedule their volunteer time with a student when we already have an open lab or an evening lesson going, so that they can get that support from the teacher or the instructor with Zoom issues or additional materials or whatever. That's been much more positive for us. We do have 1 volunteer meeting with students in person right now. And I think as our older volunteers get vaccinated and get more comfortable, I think we just got an email yesterday that a few more are ready to come back. So the next thing is making it work. So I know we've all kind of talked this to death, how we make it work through all of this. So when we talked about it at our office, how we've been making it work is we have been almost relentless with our contacting. We email our students, we call, we text, we do use WhatsApp. We have everybody's been assigned different tasks that we need to stay up on top of. And one of us Their job is every week or every week and a half to make sure we're going through. We have developed a persistence file in SID, and anybody we want to make sure that doesn't drop through the cracks, we go through, that person goes through and checks the logs and makes sure that person has been contacted regularly. So when I say relentless, I mean it has been a major part of what we've been doing. We've taken this time during COVID to sample a lot of different distance learning platforms that had been made available. And we were able to kind of pick and choose things that we like the best. We have been doing a lot of paper packets, either through email pickup, or we've even mailed them out to people if that's the only way they can get them. And we have just done a really good job of staying together as a team. Lots of meetings and lots of Zoom meetings, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, making sure we all know what everybody else is doing. And one of the best things that we've done is we've switched all of our student logs onto SID. So now it doesn't matter where somebody's working from. It doesn't matter if you're working from home or from a different site. We all can see where we've left off with each previous student. So no matter where you are as a teacher or where the student ends up being able to come online, we've been able to keep their learning consistent and not have them feel like not one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. So that's been good. All right, and then the next page, we have done, since we've had a little bit of time with the fewer students, we've taken as many learning opportunities as we can. Most of us have completed Distance Learning 102. We're right now in the process of, we're about 3/4 of the way, I think, through doing the Technology Integration Initiative cohort. And almost all of us, I think all but one of us, were able to go through the teacher verification model training and are in process of being certified. So that has been really, really interesting and helpful. Yes, I meant to get you an example. I see on the notes of the SID logs. So if you want, am I able to share my screen? Patsy?
So you are not a co-host, but we could make that happen, or is there something you could upload that we could share?
I could make some sample ones later, and I could upload something, because otherwise I could jump over. I have one student.
I just need to, sorry about that.
I have one student that has volunteered to let me share her stuff so you could see it. So if you want, I can come over and show you quick on SID what I mean by it. So every student is different, and obviously this is not going to be she's actually graduated through adult diploma. But if you look here, if we go in, so what we do is in the logs, instead of doing the logs in the files, we have a every time we have contact with a student, whether it's email, whether they come in person, you can see sent an email. Now she's been pulled from the retention class because she graduated. When we talk to her, this is one we don't have a lot of actual class contact with because she's graduated, but here, let me pull somebody else real quick for you. So the one that you saw up there before that, so this student right here was in, and we say, okay, she's got her GED. She took her GED for language. This is where she left off in the number power book. Just little tiny bits and pieces that we do so that the next person can pick up. It's been particularly helpful when we're talking about students that are distance learning. So here's a student that's a distance learning student. And we put, let's see, he hasn't come anymore recently, but we put exactly like right here, the one I've highlighted, we worked on divisions, set number power number 1, pages 1 and 2 on 104, and we'll send 2 reading assignments. So the next person who works on Zoom with them is able to pick up exactly where they left off, even if they, didn't work with him previously. So I don't know. These are not the best ones. These are just ones I could think of really quickly to share with you. Oh, yeah, we have in our distance learning, we have a persistence file. So we have a class that we set up under COVID. So we made a COVID location per se. And we have this class called Persistence and Retention. And every new student that came in this year, maybe the past 3-4 months, plus any other students as we think of them, maybe if we get time, we throw them into this class right here. And then as we go through, so I jump onto this person, and then I go into logs, and I see when's the last time I talked or we had any sort of contact with this person. And then I just sit and I either call or email or whatever. And then I make my log, and then I go over to the next person. And see right here, so all 84 people are here in one place. So it takes about, maybe an hour of your time. You just click right through, you send your email, you send your phone call, you send the work, whatever it is, and we can keep in touch with them. And then every few months we take an hour, we review it, we pull people out or add people in as necessary. And that's been really, really helpful. There's been a lot of students that have said, thanks for keeping up with me. I had a guy who probably was in here over and over and over again. And finally, he's like, I never would have gotten through this if you guys hadn't, checked in on me a couple times a month. So let me get out of here for you. They're not all of our new students. We have 131 students right now that are listed on file. So that's 84 of them. So some of the others aren't in there because I don't really know why. Oh, I know, maybe some of them have said we're taking a break right now. It's a constant evolution. So maybe there are a few more that should be in there, but we try to have everybody who's active at this moment in there. Unless they're being super, super on it and they're coming in 5 times a week, then we haven't even bothered to put them in there because there's been no need for persistence because they're always there. Anything else on that? It's been really, really helpful. Honestly, that's been the biggest change. We had talked about doing it for years, and COVID made us push into doing it on SID. And I'm so thankful because it's been a huge change for us for the benefit, for the better. Challenges, way too much Zoom, which we've all talked about too ad nauseum. We've found different ways to combat that, but that's the hardest thing, has been too much Zoom. And then the other thing is, figuring out how to get all of our time demands and all the very few people we have and still, meeting all of our students' needs. So next page. What we hope to see in the future. Obviously, we want to fully resume in-person classes with an open door policy because we are at M State, so our door is locked. So they have to call us to be let in. And we're really hoping, obviously, that we get our former students coming back, but until there aren't any childcare issues and with vaccinations coming, and we have a lot of students that are really struggling with transportation issues because of the rural nature of where we are. And we're really hoping to see a lot of new students. So we had an influx a couple of weeks ago where we had like 6 students come from our ALC, and we were so excited for a minute, and then the weather got nice and it slowed down. So. And finally, we are very excited about the teacher verification model. We just got a few of them back and approved, and we can't wait to get those into common use because we just see a lot of benefit for that. And where are we? What we plan to keep. Next slide. So student logs in SID, that's my highlight. That's the best thing that we've done, I think. We've always encouraged appointments, but requiring appointments, requiring is kind of a loose term. We still have people call from the door, but that expectation of knowing somebody's coming in has really also helped us with our retention efforts. So we're going to still strongly encourage appointments in the future, and it just has helped a ton. We're going to keep Zoom as needed. Our goal right now is to probably keep it as kind of as though it's another appointment. So we will like they can call and say, hey, I need help. And we would treat someone on Zoom as though they were a student in our one-room schoolhouse. So we would hop from student to student, including that person on Zoom. And we can throw them into breakout rooms and split it up as needed. But we think we'll be able to keep Zoom that way and still hit those needed students and just treat it like it's someone in in our classroom. So. And then we're going to keep working on our distance learning platforms, keep getting students up and running, keep them motivated. We have one person, our distance learning coordinator, who emails all the students on the distance learning platforms every couple of weeks and, encourages and entices with, goals and awards. So that's what we're hoping to keep. And then we're on to challenges and opportunities. Obviously, we probably all have a lot of the same challenges and opportunities. How do we bring in new students post-pandemic? You know, how do we get the word out there? How do we get them coming back? How do we help meet their needs outside of being their academics, so that we can help them bridge that structure that they need so they can start coming back again? How do we keep students coming back? Because a lot of people are feeling so discouraged and overwhelmed right now. Even if they come in one time, how do we keep them coming back now? And how do we get those former students who just decided now was not the time during COVID? How do we get them coming back? Another thing that we were talking about was our approach to how we handle students has really changed during COVID. When we had such a fewer amount of students coming in, we kind of shifted how we handled them, and they get a lot more of our individual time. And how do we shift that as we're getting busier? Because we'll have a day where we have 6 or 7 students in at a time, and we're just exhausted, and we're running from student to student, and we're thinking this was nothing before. So how do we shift back to still providing that kind of upgraded service, but still be able to handle the more students we hope to see? That's probably something that we really have been scratching our heads about. And then the next page on challenges and opportunities, I have another slide for that, my last slide. And it's, we're really worried, I'm sure as all of you are, about how to bring our contact hours back up. I think this past month in March was the first month where we were at least a little more than half of what last year was. So that's probably our biggest thing. How do we grow with our, smaller staff? How do we continue to grow so we're not kind of in a never-ending spiral of bleakness when it comes to contact hours? And like I said, how do we manage to do that with our reduced staff and our reduced hours? And we had a really good contingent of active volunteers before, and almost all of them were either older or maybe had health issues. So we really want to make sure we maintain a focus on how to get them back and working with our students again, because they were really a vital part of our success in the past. And most importantly, we're really looking forward to returning to normal programming. We miss having our community ed classes. We missed our field trips. We miss our student gatherings and our, bring your culture to school and share with us kind of things. So we just really miss our students most of all. But that's the end of what I have.
Thank you so much, Jen. Again, save your questions for Jen. We'll have time to talk at the end, and I'll hand it over to Abby now.
Hi, everyone. It's fun to see your faces, or at least your names. Thanks for being here. So, and you're totally welcome while I'm speaking to put things in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. So I work at Ramsey County at the Correctional Facility. So we serve the area around St. Paul. We have 2 units. One unit is residents who have been sentenced, and mostly folks in that unit identify as male. And the other unit, which I work in, is smaller. It's a mix of people who are pre and post sentence. It's also a mix of people from Ramsey and Dakota counties, and it's primarily people who identify as female. Most of our students are working on math or literacy skills, and about half of them are working towards their high school credential. Since last March, we had about 8 of the months in the last 18 that we didn't have programming. You probably heard nationally there have been some real horror stories about what's happened with COVID in correctional settings, just like any of the other kind of settings where people live. Ramsey has done a great job of preventing the spread of COVID in the building, but that's meant that we haven't had very much programming. So we're back. In the last 18 months, we did a lot of correspondence work, which was really tough, primarily because we had new people coming in that maybe wanted services, but we didn't really have any way to assess their needs at all. So we did some old-fashioned correspondence work with writing, and now we're back in person. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna go through those same questions. You can go on to the next slide. So the biggest thing about this very moment is that we are definitely still in a time of change. I said we came back to the building, but we didn't really come back to the same program. There's a lot that has changed in our building, and there's a lot that I think will continue to change. So that's been the biggest piece, just living with not really knowing what things are going to look like in a few months. You can go to the next. So in this very moment, this is my classroom. We were always a small program. We had 3 teachers, now we have 2. I used to see about 7 to 12 students before COVID, and today I had 3. So I've been running about 2 to 4 students in person, and then I have about 6 that I'm working with via correspondence that are in their dorm but can't come up. Our other unit just reopened, and they have about 6 students right now, and it looks like that's going to grow a little bit, but they used to have somewhere in the 20s. So we're just kind of running small and seeing how things go. I have room in my classroom for 8 students to be each over 6 feet apart. The limiting factor for us right now is really more about number of inmates in the building and also the length of stay. And it used to be that after a couple of days, they were able to come to programs, but now they're quarantined until it's about 15 days, and it includes them getting a COVID test, which is good for obviously lots of reasons, but it means that our programming has been impacted a bit. We can go to the next slide. So our core instruction hasn't changed a lot. It's core academics. It's very individualized. Everyone has their own individualized learning plan. You can go to the next slide. We do a mix of independent work and individualized lessons. So there's, you can go to the next slide. So some things that they're doing all on their own, and then some of these pictures are things they might be doing as an activity with other students. I offer group lessons when I can, and we do some shared academic activity every day, regardless of their learning level. We're continuing to be as creative as we can with what we can do interactive and in multimodal ways and still keep it multi-level appropriate and now also COVID safe. So in addition to paper-based work, like kind of textbook-based work, computer-based work, we try to have something that's like hands-on or movement during the classes. You can go ahead to the next slide. All right, go ahead. So in terms of making it work, I think we skipped it. What did we skip? So in terms of making it work, three things. One, my program has always given us as educators a lot of freedom to sort of pace our own work. And I can say more about that, but I do want to acknowledge it because I think others have had a harder time. And then the other piece of making it work was what I mentioned earlier. We've just been sort of, Britt is the other teacher in my program, and she said, like, we just have to accept that we're witnessing change and just kind of roll with what's going to happen. And I think that is a very helpful frame for us. So we've been planning for now, maximizing what we can do with the time we have with the students, and then thinking about our best guesses for what's coming in the short-term future and prepping for that. You can go ahead to the next slide. And then I don't know if you have those days where it feels like you're putting out fires, or I don't know, in a previous job I had like this run of months where it just felt like I was getting like caught in an ocean wave. Like I would just come in, get tumbled, and then go home and come in and do it again the next day. And I at that time I found this book, The Together Teacher, and there's lots of books like it. It's a book about like learning more organizational strategies, and it's specifically for educators. There were various strategies in there that I learned then that I am still using today, and I find them very helpful. So I have not a to-do list, but I have a schedule that I use for the week of the to-dos that I need to get to. And then I keep a separate list of things that I do need to address, but I know that I'm not going to, in the reasonable amount of time, get to in the next week. And I just, even though I just checked it before this session, I have 100 things on that wish list, but I don't feel overwhelmed. I feel like I can be realistic at what I'm going to accomplish. And I also, and this is, I think, the more important piece, that system that I learned from that book helped me feel like I can keep a balance of addressing immediate need and also looking at what the long-term needs are and making sure that I'm moving forward on those as well. So I recommend that book, although I'm sure there are other books that do similar things. You can go ahead to the next. All right. So this question offered me what I predict or what I hope about the future. So I'm going to answer what I hope. We can go ahead to the next one. I'm in county corrections, and correction facilities overall tend to break people down into a real binary of male and female. And there is a place for services that are focused around needs related to the way people identify in terms of gender. But I also think sometimes that puts us in a position where we're making instructional decisions based on things that don't really have anything to do with what the instructional needs are. So I feel hopeful that that will evolve, and I see some signs that that is evolving. Also, I think in the field, we're on the edge of what seems to be a huge opportunity about shared remote classes. I know I've talked to some other folks in one-room schoolhouse meetings about this, but if you think about your program and whatever it is that comes into the one-room schoolhouse for your setting that is like a smaller group, like maybe you only get a few English learners, or maybe you have mostly English learners and you get that just 1 or 2 native speakers that are trying to get their GED. Or maybe you only occasionally get a student who their focus is really just learning to read. Or maybe it's not even about numbers. Maybe the structure of your program means that certain students are harder to serve. For our program, it's English learners. For English learners that are at the like beginning and low intermediate levels, we only get a few a year. And if they would benefit from being like a kind of immersive English learning environment, we can't offer that. We can offer just like occasional individualized work moving in and out of working with them. And I can see how it could be so ideal for me to be able to say, oh, such and such program has an online course at 2. So let's have you come up and do the normal things we do in our group every day. But then at 2, we're going to put you on the computer and you can be in an immersive ESL class for an hour. So I feel like there's a lot of promise there. I've been watching Melissa, I think you're on this call. I've been watching Melissa Bascorum, some of the things that she offers in her program. And some of the things you do, Melissa, we don't offer. And I've been like, wouldn't it be amazing if one of my students could just remote into that class? I know that there's a lot of things that would make that complicated. We need a real game plan, and we also need some leadership that can really think about thinking outside of the boxes we've been in terms of the way our funding works. We're going to need some programs to be able to let go of ego in terms of like, these are our students and nobody can have them. And I know that that means figuring out ways to share funding, but it just seems like there's so much promise there about really being robust. And I also think that as we first look at that, the instinct is going to be to hand things over to larger programs that already have individualized classes. But I think, I mean, specific classes, but I think we know that one-room schoolhouse programs have some things that we do for our learners that actually is better than what the traditional whole group model does for learners. So I think we need to figure out what those are, name them, inventory them, and then really nurture them as we look at like, what could our next phase look like? What could it look like to do this, shared remote programming? We can go to the next slide. Okay, so the third thing that I hope will change is bail. There have already been some movements in Ramsey County and other counties to reduce cash bail and to change other policies that create inequities along class lines about who's incarcerated. We are incarcerating our neighbors based on what they can afford to pay rather than based on their crime or the safety of our communities. And there's lots of reasons why that's a problem. And this year it became clear that it's a community health issue as well. But I think it's also an adult ed issue, and I won't, I know we're pressed for time to get through all of us today, but I'm very happy to talk with folks more about bail and how I think this is an adult ed issue. And if you want to talk more after, I'm happy to do that. All right, we can go to the next slide. Go ahead. Okay, so for me, bins, holy moly. I used to have, some of you have already heard me talk about this. I used to have like shared materials and it felt really great. And I had like a pile of pencils and the books were in our bookshelf. And because of COVID, we shifted over to every inmate having their own, that's in the program, having their own bin with their work in it. And you can see they have a pencil case there. I will never go back. It is so much easier. The students have what they need. They're more independent. I really like it. Also, I'm a little bit ashamed to say that the other thing I will keep doing is cleaning my classroom. I would have told you before that my classroom was clean, but in cleaning for COVID, I've learned that I can do better with that, so I will. We can go to the next slide. Internet based learning. I mean, we knew this before COVID, that the internet and computers are becoming an increasing tool in education, but I think there's no going back. We've seen that we can do more. And I think up until now in our field, it's sort of been like, there's these cool online things, but don't worry about it corrections, or don't worry about it rural sites that don't have internet. And I think we need to shift a little bit and say, how are we going to make this work for corrections? Or how are we going to make this work for rural sites with limited internet? Because we're getting to a point where it's not like a special add-on you can do on the computer, where a bunch of the core things or the best practices are being offered via computer or internet. So we're going to have to figure out how to make that work. We can go to the next slide. And sort of in tension with that, I'm concerned about predatory tablets in corrections. And some of you who may have heard of this, and maybe this is new information for some. If you want more information, you can just literally Google the phrase predatory tablet prison, and you'll find tons of articles. You know, in correctional settings, there are vendors that sell the things that residents need, whether that's phone calls or like a shampoo. And if you think about the places that you can't leave, like if you think about if you've been to like an amusement park, how much a Coke or an aspirin costs there, it's usually like really expensive because you don't have the choice to go to another store and buy it for less. So if you phone calls and corrections, hygiene products, they're really expensive. And there are vendors that make money off of that. Part of the reason for that is because taxpayers, incarcerating people is expensive and taxpayers don't want to pay for that. So by putting fees on things, that's a way for counties or facilities to raise the money they need to run the program. But that basically means is poor families are paying for it. And there's been this new face of that, which is vendors are suggesting that residents could be issued tablets, so something sort of like an iPad. And part of the foot in the door is that they could do educational work on the tablets. But I think if you are in a program that starts hearing about this, the questions that I'm at, I think we should be asking a lot of questions. Some of the questions that I'm asking are, oh, I hear you saying it's free. What are the fees involved for the residents? I know for something we looked at when I was working for Hennepin County, each email you sent or received was $1. And if you can imagine how many emails you send or that a student might send, how that would add up really fast. We asked about what the quality of the educational programs are and what educational objectives they're intended to meet, and whether they would be at all adaptive or responsive to what students' academic needs were, and whether teachers involved could have say over what programs were involved. And then who would manage the tech side of them. You know, so if there's a resident doesn't know how to use it, or the resident that has a device that is malfunctioning, who manages that and who pays for that service? We can go on to the next slide. All right, go ahead. So this is going to sound like it's a total random story, but I promise it loops back. So I went on a trip a few years ago to Ecuador, and one of the places I stayed when I got there, they handed me a bag lunch. And when I was eating my bag lunch, I pulled out this fruit that I had never seen before in my life. It had its skin felt more like an eggshell than like an orange peel. And I was holding it and I did not know. I literally thought, should I take a bite out of it? Should I peel the skin? Am I supposed to do something else with it? And it was such a magical experience. Like, you know, or I know like conceptually that there are options and choices that I haven't even heard of, but to be holding one in your hands is so cool. And I think that in some ways that is the position we're in right now, that there are options that if you had said to me a year ago, all of adult ed will learn to teach online, or most of adult ed will learn to teach online, I would have been like, that is ridiculous. A field can't shift that fast in a year. And now we know we can. And we know that there's a ton of different ways to do the work we were doing. So in that way, I think it's such a cool time to be thinking about our work. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I think there's questions that we can be asking ourselves in this really cool moment about sort of what is our purpose and what's worth keeping and what's worth adding and what no longer serves, like what were something we were doing before that it's not necessary to do it that way anymore. And I think particularly one-room schoolhouse educators are in a great place to do that, because I think we're really used to being in trainings and someone is giving instructions for something that will only work in a whole group setting, but we're used to picking it apart and saying, this is the purpose of that, I can do it this way, or that sounds really important, so I'm going to shift what I was doing to make that work. And I think that's a place the whole field is in right now, trying to figure out like what are the best ways to do things and what things can students be doing on their own asynchronously and what things can they do together is a question that we've been thinking about the whole time. And then you can go ahead, Danielle, I saw your question in the last segment. So TVM is another thing that I'm feeling very hopeful about. So the teacher verification model, thanks, I know Elizabeth and Adam and Astrid and Christina, I'm sure other people worked really hard on this. So there is this field is piloting this model where we will be able to have students work asynchronously on work and be able to get contact hours for it. And for some of our programs, this is stuff we were doing before. So when my student couldn't come out of SEG or they were quarantined for health reasons, I was still doing correspondence work in the past, but there was no way for me to count that for contact hours. And now we're working on developing ways to do that. So I think that, I know it's a pilot where there's a lot to figure out, but it's got a lot of promise. And I think especially for one-room schoolhouses. Maybe we can talk more about that in the Q&A if we have time at the end. All right, so that's my segment. I'll hand it over.
Yes, thank you so much, Abby. I loved the fruit pictures. We can definitely talk more about TVM and Danielle's question. And Sherry, I saw your comment about using transitions funds for regional courses. I think we should definitely talk more about that as well. But for now, I'll hand it over to Traci.
Hi from northern Minnesota. It's snowing out, yay. It's been that way for the last few days. I have to say it's a great year to be an ABE teacher. A lot of learning, a lot of failures, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of emotions just happening through this whole year. So, but I'm Traci, I'm from Warroad, Minnesota, and I've been with adult ed, I think 20 years or almost 20 years. You can go to the next slide, please. So where I'm at is the little green section up in Northwest Minnesota. We serve 30 school districts in 10 counties. We have over 12,000 square miles. My coordinator has 2 workforce service areas. We have a total of 13 wonderful staff members, and that's including my coordinator. And we are currently serving, I believe, 512 students since May of 2020. I am a one-room schoolhouse. I'm 85 miles to the nearest ABE teacher. And for me, this year has been really hard because we haven't had our staff meetings where we get together. So there was nothing where everything was online. So it was a lot of learning by myself and so forth like that. And so also I want to say I'm 6 miles from the Canadian border. Go ahead and with the next slide. These are the current communities where we have teachers in, as you can see. I service 2 right now. Bennett is online with a couple of students that I have. So, but these are the current communities that my supervisor or coordinator has teachers in. You can go to the next slide. So with COVID, I was getting phone calls, I was getting text messages or drop-ins saying, teacher, can you help me? Can you help me? I want to get shot. I want to get shot. And so I worked with Roza County Health Department, Marvin Windows a Door, and the Lao Temple. And I tried to get as many of our Asian population in Roza County / Warroad signed up for the vaccines. So, and our Asian community pretty much consists of Lao, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, and I believe there's some Filipino, but I have never had them in my classroom. So, but we had over 100 Asians sign up for the vaccine. So, and we have 30 tomorrow that were canceled because of the Johnson & Johnson. So that was kind of a heartbreak right there. So, but it was a great opportunity to get my students because of the confusion of calling in, working the phone, writing their name, or all the stuff they needed to do online. So I was glad to help out with that, and I think we did a pretty good job working with all these different areas. So go ahead to the next slide. So my current programming is face-to-face, and if you see my last bullet on that page, I've been face-to-face since pretty much mid-July. And with that being said, I didn't have a lot of downtime to learn how to do things, go to a lot of the webinars or the coffee breaks that I wanted to do and so forth like that. I was working both distance and face-to-face. So my face-to-face is Monday and Wednesdays, 11 to 5, Tuesdays, 12 to 5, Thursdays, 11 to 2 in Warroad. And then my face-to-face are 9:30 to 11:30 Rozo. And then again, Thursdays, 2:30 to 5. And then distance learning classes are always available, and I do them every day. Sometimes I have students in my classroom working as I am teaching online. It is hard, it is stressful, but I've learned that they have been patient with me, and they know that things are difficult, and if they want class, and they haven't had, I guess my students have been really good. They want to have class, so they're willing to make it work. So I haven't had any problems. If I say I have to go meet with a student that needs a little help, I'll be back in 2 minutes, work on your book. They're pretty good about it. So go ahead to the next slide. And what a year it has been. Like I said, it's a great time to be in ABE, a lot of learning, a lot of figuring out what works, what doesn't. I made sure my students had a device to use for distance learning. I made sure that they knew how to use that device, went to their house, sat in their parking lot, sat in cars next to each other, hooking them up, so forth like that. I tried my best to keep the same hours that they had when they were coming to school before COVID, and that has worked out pretty good too. And also, after COVID had started, I had extra iPads lying around, and I wanted to get them to my students who were using their phones. And finally, my supervisor, Kirsten, got somebody ready. Her name is Alice, and got the iPads and different technology ready to allow our students to check them out, which has been a blessing in disguise. So now all my iPads are being used for distance learning and for even the extra classes, if it's like ESL library or Burlington English and so forth like that. So I'm trying to think what else a year. I guess I've been face to face, and I haven't had any downtime. Even summer, where I usually work 1 day a week or 2 days a week, I think I was working almost every day a week just to make sure my students were being taken care of, because they were kind of scared, and they wanted to keep I guess I wanted to keep that routine with them, which was very important to them too. So if you want to go to the next slide. So my biggest challenges for me was learning that I can't please everyone online. And that was, you just hate making people upset, or you're making your students upset, because then you think, oh, they're not going to come back. I don't know if maybe it's just me. And then making sure that my online classes didn't try to interfere too much with students that were coming in. So. And then I had to learn to solve those little challenges without a lot of help, meaning like if I needed to figure out how to use Google Meet or Zoom, I watched a lot of videos, spent a lot of time educating myself when I had some downtime and so forth like that. And then I learned that it was okay to ask for help, and it doesn't make me less of a teacher if I do ask for help. And that was kind of hard for me too, because I am kind of independent. But I didn't want to bother people because everybody else was having the same problems I was, and I don't like to bother them if I didn't have to. But I learned to reach out more and ask for help. And then the biggest thing was to reassure my students that everything's going to be okay with them and so forth. So if you go to my next slide, please. What are we doing post-pandemic? Well, we're going to keep our face-to-face classes. Hopefully COVID rules will allow more students into our classrooms. I know East Grand Forks, we're only allowed so many people at the college. So we have more students, I believe, that we can serve, but they're not allowed to come to class because of the limit that they can have in there. So hopefully with COVID rules, they'll lift and we can have more students come in that way. We will continue to offer distance learning as an option for our students in our communities. I think it's been wonderful to have, because I think those students that want to stay with us will use that option. We are currently looking into a teacher that only does online classes for our consortium. And that's something Kirsten has talked about with us. And I think that's a wonderful idea, just to serve all the students that want to continue what they're doing. We will continue to Google Meet our staff meetings. I haven't seen, other than on the computer, I haven't seen any of our staff members in person since, isn't that terrible, 2019 Christmas party, 2019. Does that sound kind of weird? Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's kind of weird, but our Google staff meetings have been very productive still. They're 2.5, 3 hours long, and we get a lot accomplished. We will continue our adult diploma program with our consortium advisor. It's been great to have Stephanie aboard and have somebody that's that go-to person that just takes over and lets us know what this person needs to accomplish our adult diploma. And we will continue our GED testing in our local classrooms. I'm hoping to have a few more students graduating the next few weeks, because they have that opportunity to take tests in our classroom on computers with Wi-Fi that will work. And then we will still offer standardized online courses for our consortiums. So there's a couple of us that are working on our teacher verification model and so forth like that. So hopefully we can utilize that. If you want to go to my next slide. We will also offer Soft Skills Pro initiative with our workforce partners. This is new. We were just trained on it last week. So hopefully that will get up and running. It's kind of a soft skills where you're teaching your students how to, what's the word I want to say? How to behave when you're, I shouldn't say behavior, how to act, how to respond and so forth when jobs, seeking jobs and so forth like that. I think we have 100 seats that we're using, and we're going to share them with our workforce partners. We're also looking at a regional approach to offer specialized classes, similar to what's being done down in the cities, you know, create courses that are in the SID, but for our regions. And I think as Jenny had said, you know, it could be used with transitional monies and so forth like that. So that's something that my coordinator and other coordinators in our area are looking into. And then just giving our students the opportunity to achieve their goals at any level with Northwest Service Co-op, making sure that if there's not a class time that they can get into, that they have an online opportunity to go to and work to get the GED or work on their ESL language skills or reading skills or whatever they're working on. If you go to our next slide. What am I working on? I'm working on my teacher, I'm in the technology integration initiative with my coordinator, Kirsten, and the tech person, Alice. And that's almost done. And then that's been a kind of a neat thing. If anybody hasn't done it, I really recommend it. It has really opened our eyes and what we could do with the technology we have, and just coming up with a plan and so forth like that to use with our consortium has been really helpful. And then there's another teacher and myself that are working on getting verified with the TBM. And I am helping out as a distance teacher for the East Grand Forks ESL library class that we're holding for students that can't get into maybe at the college that are interested in extra language skills, speaking skills, how to apply for jobs, and so forth like that. So it's kind of a neat thing. I'm creating the curriculum for it, and then we have a teacher that will be on site, and I'll be there via computer and working with those students from there. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me afterwards. So, but thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Traci. So I see it looks like we have a pretty small number of participants, which selfishly kind of makes me very happy because we can really have a nice conversation now. I would just invite you to unmute yourself to speak, or if you need to, the Zoom chat is fine. And this is your time. What do you want to talk about? I have some questions here, but really this is our time to talk.
I was going to say, I teach everything from early ESL to adult diploma. So I thought I saw something come up through that. So if somebody was asking me, I do everything, intake, all of it.
I guess, Traci, I was a little curious about your ESL library class. Is that ESL library like the distance learning platform?
We are using that as the platform for the class. So when I created the Google Classroom, I used the teacher portion of the ESL library, and that's what we're going to teach. Like our first class is called Making Introductions. And so we have it all set up using the curriculum that is on the ESL library, and then we will enroll those students we have 20 students right now that will be currently enrolled in that classroom. We got 20 iPads ready for those students to use to do the homework on for that distance learning platform. And so that's how we're working that right now. So it's a good, I really love ESL library. So there's so much there to do.
Mm-hmm. I see Astrid has put in the chat for Traci and Jen moving forward. How are your programs going to make decisions about what to offer online versus what to offer in person?
Go ahead.
You can go ahead first, Traci, if you want to.
I'm trying to get my thoughts together.
Oh,
I know. Go ahead if you have it off the top of your head. Go for it.
oh, we've been talking about it a lot lately. And while we're still going to be just supporting the different distance learning platforms we have going on right now, we're transitioning from Rosetta Stone back to Burlington English. We kind of switch over every few years. And, you know, obviously all the ones that we're using, MobiMax, ReadWorks, Read Theory, Khan Academy, etc. But our goal right now is based on how our students are moving. We want to still offer open labs because we're a one-room schoolhouse. We do, you know, everything from ABE, ADP, GED, adult diploma, and ESL. So we want to keep those evening classes open, at least one a week where students can drop in after work. And then we're moving to the whole using a Zoom appointment during the day during our regular operating hours. And we're going to see if that keeps our students coming in without pigeonholing them into small Zoom times or small classroom times.
And I think that's just kind of the same thing we're doing. I think our coordinator's been taking notes through this whole pandemic, trying to figure out what we should offer, what the need is, and so forth like that. I think she's going to let us continue to do some distance learning, you know, if that's what our students want. We're not going to shut it off. I think that if the students want it, we could offer those online classes whenever they are in need. And I know in the next probably in the next month or two, I'm sure Kirsten's going to be coming up with some classes that if she does hire an online teacher, what classes are in need at that point. So it's still up in the air. Everybody's going to be working this summer like they did last summer and doing what they can to serve the students in their communities.
You know, Traci, you and I are both doing the teacher verification model too. So I think for us too, it depends on how many lessons and assignments we can get up and running. We have all these grand plans about different things we want to use moving forward. And the more of those that are up and ready, the more versatility we have with keeping things online too, to a certain extent.
It is, you're right. it's just getting through the paperwork to get the teacher verification model going. So that's my biggest thing right now, is trying to find time to finish all of it and get that
Right.
submitted.
Well, and just how to take all these things that you're already doing partially and fully get them into that TVM model. You know, it's a little overwhelming when you think of all the possibilities.
It is. I'm excited to, because creating the curriculum all year and having it all in one place and to be used the way it should or intended is going to be a nice way to incorporate it into our consortium.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
I see Danielle put in the chat for Traci, how do you stay connected to your students throughout the summer in hopes that they'll return again in the fall?
I haven't had a lot of downtime from my students. The only students I don't have anymore are my Puerto Ricans that I had in Rosal, because they all got jobs this spring. So I lost all those students, but a lot of my students have stayed with me through COVID, and half of them are online and will continue online, and the rest will be face-to-face when our classes are working through the summer. So I will continue to do what I'm doing as I have been since last summer.
Or I wonder if anyone else who has kind of a summer break or a summer pause in their programming, if you would want to share ideas for staying connected to students throughout the summer.
We
Can
don't
I ask the
pause.
question? Oh, I was gonna, okay, go ahead then.
Oh no, it's okay. I was just gonna say we don't pause, but we go down to 2 days a week in the summer, 2 or 3, and we only if any students want to start in the summer, we kind of do it on a limited basis. But I mean, the only real thing that we've done in the past, although of course who knows what it'll be like this year, but we make a point of putting in our budget some of the marketing ideas that we don't normally use. You know, we go a little bit bigger, a little bit better when it comes to our flyers and our postcards and our mailings, but that's really about it.
Thank you. And I see there's a question in the chat for Abby. What are some COVID-safe interactive activities that have worked in your in-person classroom?
Yeah, okay, I was getting ready to type one out, so that's great if I can say it. So for part of it, it's been useful for me to think about the games I was already using and just where the contact point is. So I play a game called Placing Digits, where they take turns rolling a dice, and then the digit that comes up on the dice you have to place on like your sheet, and you're trying to create a number that's higher than everyone else's. And they couldn't pass around the dice. And I have several games that involve dice, and I was like, at first I had to put them all away, and then I realized we just ordered a whole bunch of dice. So now when I play games where you would normally be passing a dice around, everyone has their own dice. So for some of this, it's just a modification like that. Similarly, there's some card games where you pass cards back and forth, and that's not ideal for COVID, but there are other card games where really, once you get your set of cards, it's yours. Like if you think about the way you play like a number war card game, the person you're playing against puts their cards down, but you don't need to touch the other person's cards. So if they have enough cards, they're not going to have to like reshuffle the deck. We can play that way. And then once they play with it, we just let it sit unused for a few days, which is supposed to be enough for it to have less germs on it or whatever. Let's see. You saw in the picture, there's a game called Timeline, which I highly recommend. You can I don't have the link, but I could send it to someone, or we can Google. But Timeline is these little cards that students put in order. So it's like verbal conversation, plus it's thinking about like critical thinking about like the sequence of events, and getting more information about US or world history. But when we used to play, they would have to touch each other's cards to see where their card went in the order of the others. But you saw in the picture, they were like taped to the wall. So we modified so that when you put your card down, you tape it to the wall so everyone can see the cards that are on the board without having to touch anything. I would be happy to make a list of some of the games that I'm using and send it out if there's a way to do that.
Yes, I would gladly collect that and post it. That would be great.
Can I ask a question as a teacher? Is there a group of teachers that are one room schoolhouse that are working on the teacher verification model plan, that are working, filling out the paperwork together and making sure they're filling out correctly, that I could join? Or is it just, we're just working on our own? Or if somebody wants to create a group and work with each other, I'd be happy to do that.
Elizabeth, this is Astrid. We've talked about the idea, I think, of maybe creating a subgroup within the One Room Schoolhouse Mighty Networks, perhaps to exchange ideas around teacher verification model in the One Room Schoolhouse. Is that something?
Yeah, we have our new Mighty Networks group. There's also something called OER Commons, like Open Educational Resources, where I believe there's already a Minnesota adult education group through that. So we could explore that platform as well. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, but yes, I think it'll be exciting to start collaborating once more people become certified and this becomes kind of just another thing that we all do in Minnesota and collaborate together. What other questions are on people's minds? Perhaps related to something the panelists said, or perhaps you would just like to pick someone's brain. You know, it's hard sometimes when you're in a small program where there's only a few teachers and you don't get to bounce ideas off people. So.
I don't know. I saw Danielle earlier asked about like building some sort of classroom coherence when you have students all over the map in terms of what they're working on. I'd be interested to hear if other people have answers about that.
Yes, so would I. And I'll just kind of summarize, Abby, what you had said in the chat so we have it for the recording. Abby said, building a cohesive culture is something I've thought a lot about. A few ideas: there's always an academic task of the day, something with a low floor or a high ceiling that all learners can join in on. When possible, I do shared lessons if it's relevant for more than one learner. And for coherence, thinking if I see connections between work that different students are doing, I facilitate them connecting about it, like having them share assignments. And these don't necessarily happen at the beginning or end of class time because students are arriving and leaving at varied times. And sorry, totally pandemic, I have a child at home, so there's some background noise.
I think the only thing I would add is we often have a lot of students with varying skills. And we try to incorporate, every few weeks when we have, enough people, we'll say, well, tomorrow afternoon, if you're free, on Thursday, we're going to have a Scrabble day, or we're going to have a Scrabble afternoon, or we're going to have a, what's the one? I'm losing my mind. It's cribbage, different things that are that meet the educational needs, but that are fun and different, and allows our ESL students to mix with our ABE students, or whoever happens to be there. And we've found ways to modify that even through COVID, and it seems to just break the ice so that everybody feels more comfortable with whoever comes in and whatever you might encounter because you never know, every day is different with us.
I will post the New York Times picture of the day because I like it because there's no right or wrong answer. So some of my basic students will simply tell us how many people are in the picture, or what color the people are wearing, or what the weather is, or they can start very basic. And then my more advanced students can really read into it and say, I think it's an acting class versus a chiropractor appointment. And these are the reasons. And so just out of that one picture, because there is no caption, because there is no right or wrong answer, my students are able to all pull something out of it. So I've been using that at the beginning of class, and though I think it's working well, I wish I had that same kind of closure at the end of class where we could all come back together and end class. So I'm just trying to seek out some other things for the end of class.
So if we seem to be about finished for today, that's fine. There is, here, I'll talk about Mighty Networks first. So we do have a new online networking group. We were on Schoology, and the One Room Schoolhouse group on Schoology is going to remain open for the time being, but we're encouraging everyone to join the new group on Mighty Networks. And we can, yes, thank you, Gail. Gail just put the links in the chat for that. And then I just wanted to remind everyone that there are so many amazing professional development opportunities coming up soon, since we all have so much free time. But this Friday and Saturday is the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics online conference. It's only $75 registration, and Atlas will reimburse you. There are scholarships available. I'm really excited to participate. And there are lots of other great events as well. So be sure to check out the Atlas events calendar and the ABE Connect newsletter. Thank you everyone so much for attending today. Please, you can click the link that Gail put in the chat, or you will also receive a follow-up email that has a link to the evaluation, and that's how you'll receive your CEUs. And we will also make the slides available either in that email or on Mighty Networks, or probably both. So thank you so much, everyone.